Hello, everybody. This is Matt Dunfee with the Wildlife Management Institute. I want to take some time today and talk about the outdoor recreation adoption model. It's something that in the world of hunter or angler recruitment, retention, reactivation, we've been discussing for quite a while. So today we want to give you a brief overview of what the model is and what it means. So what I'm about to show you today really came out of a project that the Wildlife Management Institute spearheaded about 5 years ago to get our heads wrapped around what was happening with hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation. I want to give a lot of credit to Bob Byrne, who's now with Bob Byrne Consulting. He and I sort of brainstormed this current iteration of it, and I'll share with you some of the basic ideas of what makes it work. So let's start with looking at really the first step of an individual's, let's say, natural pathway to becoming a hunter. And if you imagine an individual who has not hunted before, the first stage they're really in as it relates to their future participation in hunting is awareness of this activity. Now, here in the United States, probably everybody is aware of hunting in some form or another, but this awareness is more personal. This is a kind of awareness where the individual really considers, is this an activity that is relevant to my life? With some demographics, it's even, is this an activity that is relevant to my social group or my family structure? And that awareness, if cultivated by either conversations or external inputs, hopefully can evolve into an interest where the individual starts to internalize the idea of hunting even more, and it becomes more than just an abstract thought or just an abstract conception of, yes, there's this thing out there called hunting, and more of, this may be something I want to look into for myself a little bit more. If that interest is piqued, and very specifically, if the motivations, the personal motivations of the individual are increased in that interest, they will eventually want to do something about it, or we hope that they want to do something about it. And in the case of hunting, they need to try it. Now, this is a critical point that defines hunting from other activities like angling, in that hunting isn't easily done on a weekend, on a whim. This is something that takes some time and planning. So it's important to note that with hunting, the interest phase is probably longer and probably more involved than, say, the interest stage for someone becoming an angler. Angling, like some other outdoor activities like biking or hiking, doesn't have quite as many skills as the skills required to become a hunter. So in that interest stage, before the trial stage, it's sometimes easier to get those individuals to try the activity, whereas in hunting, there's probably a lot we need to consider before the individual actually tries it. And this is a good strategic point to think about for those developing hunter R3 programs. It's not just as easy as asking somebody out on the next upcoming weekend. This takes some time to plan. But if that interest has been piqued and the skills and knowledge have been learned to go hunting and the individual's motivations have been aligned, they'll go and try it. Now, this is the first time that this individual will have personal experience that will back up all of their preconceptions. And that personal experience, the actual first time they try hunting, will bring about a very important decision. And it's that decision to continue. Once they know what it looks and sounds and smells and feels like, that decision becomes very real. And it's probably a binary. It's, yes, this is something I want to do again, even though I might need more help, or no, this is something I don't want to participate again. Now, if that decision is made to go forward, if you think of hunting as an example here, and that's what we're mostly talking about, that person probably does not have anywhere near the amount of skills or practice or confidence to continue doing it on their own. This stage is very critical, and a lot of the research behind this model really highlights this stage, that after people first try something, before they permanently adopt it, they are very prone to stopping the activity because they have enjoyed it, but it hasn't really become relevant to them. And now they know how much it's going to take for them to actually continue doing it. And in the case of hunting, they have a wide range of things that they're going to have to navigate before they can go forward. They probably only hunted one species. They may have borrowed the gear for the first time. They are likely not very competent in butchering skills or processing skills or cooking skills. They may not have the equipment and the gear necessary to go on a different kind of hunt. There's other regulations to look at, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this stage, although the individual may have identified, hey, I want to do this again, we as program designers and implementers, or just R3 effort folks, need to be very cognizant of how much extra help this individual needs right now, and they need some sort of next steps, additional tools, additional knowledge. The final thing about the stage to remember is that this doesn't happen overnight or even in a weekend or even in one season. This probably takes iterations of years before somebody becomes confident enough and their motivations have aligned enough with this activity to go into the next step, which is continuation without support. This is the stage that most of your, what we would call avid hunters, are in right now. They're going to go hunting no matter what. If they don't have a skill, they know where to find the information to get the skill. They know where to attend a seminar. They know what YouTube video to watch. They know how to peruse through a catalog to find what they need. This stage can last an individual's lifetime or a certain amount of time. However, this stage is very dynamic. At any time during this stage, and even the stage before, the continuation without support, an individual can lapse. Now, the definition of lapsing is not cohesive amid outdoor pursuits or activities. The best way to think about it for right now is that if an individual stops because something else got in the way, or an individual stops because their motivations got realigned, we'll call that a lapse. If they have lapsed, there is likely some probability or some opportunity for them to be reactivated into the activity of hunting. Now, it's important to note as we look at these first few steps that lapsing and reactivation is probably a dynamic process within the continuation with support and continuation without support stages. There are temporary lapses, for instance, when somebody moves to a new state, or there may be more permanent lapses when somebody gets to an age where it's not relevant to them anymore. Based on if that lapse is a normal part of the individual's lifestyle or more a permanent desertion of the activity because of a motivation realignment, our strategies will have to address each of those instances in a very specific and very different way. Now, a few more pieces to this model. Let me hone in on this decision to continue. Previous to this current iteration of the model that we're talking about, our community frequently referred to what we now call R3 as just recruitment retention. And we said it almost like it was one word. And what Bob and I started discussing is that, recruitment is probably very different from reactivation. And retention is very different from either recruitment or reactivation. We probably have 3 stages here. But where are those stages and how do we define those stages? Based on the available research, as well as sort of the expert opinion of a lot of folks who have been doing R3, this decision to continue is probably the breaking point. Everything prior to that decision, that personal decision where an individual identifies as becoming something like a hunter, everything that happens before that is based on external inputs, opinions, conversations, things that they read, things that they hear, but they've never actually tried it. So the first 3 stages, that's what we're going to call recruitment. That's a different ball game than after that decision to continue, which is really retention. Before that decision, everything is sort of abstract and you're not sure if it's going to work, and it's exciting, and your motivations haven't really solidified with the realities of the activity. After that first trial and after the decision to go forward, that individual is probably going to need different things. Their motivations are a little bit different. Their barriers are probably very different. They need more specific things. They'll have a better idea of what they need, what they don't need. They'll have a better idea of what they like or what they don't like. So the point to remember here is that recruitment programs differ slightly or maybe significantly from retention programs because of the condition of the individuals that may be going through those. What people need before they actually try hunting is likely going to be very different than what they need after they've tried it for the first time. And then our third R is, of course, reactivation, and that's fairly self-explanatory. Then that dynamic process of lapsing and potentially reactivating, that's the reactivation stage. Again, it's the third R in our R3 because we want to make the point that individuals lapsing have different needs, different barriers, and require different tools than someone in the recruitment stage. Now, a few more things I want to add to this model before we close. Going back to the earliest documentation of the theories behind this current model, one thing was very, very clear and has remained clear through all of the academic iterations of this model, and that is a social support network must exist for this individual adoption process to occur. If individuals don't have a group of people that they can encourage them, that can support them, that they can talk to, that can provide a positive reinforcing environment as this individual moves through the adoption process, it is highly likely that they will stop somewhere along the way, they will desert the activity and may not come back again. So some things, or something that we frequently don't think about in our recruitment, retention, or reactivation efforts, is that if a social support network does not exist for the individual, then our efforts have much lower probability of creating a hunter or getting them to the point where they become independent hunters. We need to think about that and make sure that we either create that social environment, or probably more realistically, we make sure that a social environment, a socially supportive environment, is available to that individual as they move through the process. The final nuance that we'll talk about here today is the process of self-identification and how that is influenced as people move through this process. We've alluded to it without specifically saying it. After the individual goes through that first trial and is starting to think about doing it in the future, the thing that will probably push them forward in that decision to continue is their self-identification with the activity. If somebody doesn't see themselves being a hunter, or in some demographics, if they don't see their families accepting them being a hunter, this self-identification likely won't form. And if that identification does not form, or if a social support network does not exist that they can safely create that self-identification, then it's highly likely that they will desert the activity. And in this graphic you're looking at, it's probably not accurate to show self-identification as sort of this linear, one-dimensional process as we move left to right. In reality, this increases with importance and increases with intensity as we move from left to right, and drives a lot of things like the individual's personal motivations, their willingness to share what they've learned with their external friends in their community, as well as their avidity long term. If the self-identification is firmly established, it's more likely that individuals will sort of push through changes in their life, whether that's a new job, they get married, they have children, they move to another state, and will allow them to reactivate if they lapse for a short period of time. So that's a brief overview of the outdoor recreation adoption model. There are many more things we could talk about, but the point I'd like to leave you all with is what this provides us as a community of R3 program implementers and designers is a way to think about the impact of our efforts on the individual. If we can design our efforts according to what is happening with different individuals and make sure that we understand where our audiences are in this adoption process, ultimately, we will increase the effectiveness and the impact of our efforts over time, and hopefully be able to move the needle on these populations that we're trying to sustain. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you all down the road.